Statement UK Steel Strategy. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I wish to make a statement on the Government's steel strategy. May I begin by declaring my membership of the community and the GMB trades unions. Mr. Speaker, resilient economic growth is the main driver of social justice. Steel is essential to both. Steel underpins the key growth-driving sectors in our modern industrial strategy. Steel has strengthened and sustained communities in England, Scotland and Wales. The future of steel in Britain is about ensuring the future strength and security of our national economy. We honour steel's proud industrial past, but we do not live in it. We are ambitious and excited for Britain's future steel sector. Steel is essential for advanced manufacturing, for clean energy, for construction, for defence and for digital technologies too. Steel is vital for sustaining thousands of lives and livelihoods, good jobs, apprenticeships and opportunities. And steel is central to communities in Port Talbot, in Motherwell, in Scunthorpe, in Sheffield, in Teesside. This House will be acutely aware that Britain's steel sector has experienced decades of decline. From failures of Thatcherism that closed Consett and Ravenscraig and shrank Corby, to the damage done by the Tories to Redcar and to Port Talbot. Steel manufacturing in Britain serves as the starkest possible monument to the failure of Thatcherite monetarism and its record of industrial vandalism. By contrast, Labour has an activist industrial strategy that determinedly targets key industries, technologies and strategically important sectors for economic development, national security and resilience. In the last 5 decades, the steel industry employment in Britain has declined by 90%, from more than 300,000 jobs in 1970 to less than 30,000 today. We are closing that decades-long chapter of deliberate deindustrialisation and commit anew to strengthening and sustaining Britain as a steel-making nation. High operating costs and global overcapacity have made it much harder for British steel companies to compete. Manufacturers have looked to cheap imported steel to keep costs down. As a result, investment tapered off, capabilities reduced, communities have been let down, and crude steel production declined by more than 50% in the last decade. Faced with these challenges, previous governments failed to present a long-term vision for steel in Britain. They were reactive, not proactive. They intervened to support specific companies at specific times, but failed to improve the general conditions for the industry as a whole. They lacked the necessary boldness, creativity and urgency. This government will not make that same mistake. Far from believing steel decline is inevitable, we embrace a future for British steel manufacture as a staple of sustainable, resilient economic growth and our national security. While the industry still faces challenges today, we will do everything we can to help it adapt, grow and succeed into the future. And our actions on steel will be driven by what is best for our national interest. Our steel strategy sets out a series of actions to reverse the failures of the past, to build a strong and resilient steel sector backed up with £2.5 billion of government investment, on top of the £500 million that we have pledged for the steelworks at Port Talbot. Our ambition is for domestic production to meet up to half of Britain's domestic demand. To support that effort, we will introduce a new trade measure to follow the existing safeguard. From 1st of July, overall quotas for imported steel will be reduced by 60% compared to the safeguard. All steel coming into the UK above those levels will be subject to a 50% tariff. This measure will apply to imported steel products that can be made in the UK. This is not a decision that I have taken lightly. I have done so to shield Britain's steel industry from the damaging effects of global overcapacity and to ensure that Britain's steel industry contributes fully to our critical national infrastructure and our defence. to shore up the UK's resilience to global shocks. Now, without this action, the UK's steelmaking capability faces real jeopardy, leaving us reliant on overseas suppliers. I will not let that happen. Steel is essential for our energy security, our transport infrastructure, our industrial strategy. And in this volatile geopolitical climate, that kind of dependence is weakness. Britain's national interest requires the strength of British-made steel. The tariff will be implemented once import quotas have been fully met, and I believe that that is essential. For the resilience of sectors reliant on steel imports, including the car industry, construction, and for defence. We will review the measure in 12 months to make sure that it is working effectively. Our approach reflects months of engagement between my department, the Steel Council, businesses, and trade unions. Now, I want to thank the trade unions that have helped us, officials in my department who have poured their heart and soul into this strategy, and of course to my ministerial team for their contributions and leadership. And as we continue to engage constructively with the EU to protect vital UK-EU steel trade, given our highly interconnected supply chains. Beyond the trade measure, we are backing electric arc furnaces to shift to greener, decarbonised steel production. As we see at Sheffield Forgemasters, electric arc furnaces have the technical capability that we need to produce the steel to the very highest of standards for nuclear, for aerospace and for defence. This is important as traditional blast furnaces will eventually reach the end of their operational lives. And a managed...
Order. I want to hear what the Secretary of State has got to say, and I'm certain that our constituents also want to hear. It's a very important statement. Secretary of State.
No, it's okay, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's just everyone's shocked to see him in his place. This is important as traditional blast furnaces will eventually reach the end of their operational lives, and a managed transition is vital to maintaining supply. That is why we took control of British Steel last year to ensure a managed transition, and we are currently working with the owner regarding the long-term future of that site. Now, I can tell the House that the UK has the opportunity to lead in clean, green steel. We are going to seize it with both hands. That's why we are also changing the clean industry bonus, making it easier for British steel to be included in British wind farms. Britain can recycle more steel. Making better use of scrap steel is fundamental to the sector's future growth. Millions of tonnes are ready to be recycled. We are building the technology to do it right here in Britain. We are creating a more competitive business environment for steel too. We are tackling the high cost of energy. Our supercharger is delivering millions of pounds in savings for steel-making firms. These businesses will benefit even further next month thanks to the changes that we are making to the network charging compensation scheme, which will increase the rate of relief from 60 to 90%. We are taking further action to support foundational industries by addressing high electricity costs with a view to boosting supply chain resilience. And our British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme could reduce bills for further businesses in the sector by providing a discount of up to 40 megawatts per hour starting from April 2027. Our private sector investment is essential for the steel sector. It is vital to driving up capacity and capability. That's why, within 10 weeks of taking office, we negotiated a substantially better deal to support the transition to green steel making at Port Talbot. So we are welcoming investment from new entrants into the UK market. The National Wealth Fund is there to support them. We will continue to work hand in hand with devolved governments too, and steel-making hubs in Wales and Scotland to bring in that additional investment. This is the vision of our steel strategy, the one that it sets out. Government with boldness, certainty and urgency. Industry with enterprise, energy and expertise. Communities stronger, safer and more secure. Working together, making our steel sector attractive to new investors, innovators, employees and apprentices. Financially stable, internationally competitive and proudly British. Together, the strategy and the new trade measures will help build a stronger, more resilient steel industry, taking the immediate action that our steel industry needs and providing a plan to help the steel sector prosper into the long term. Mr. Speaker, building a brighter future for Britain's steel has already begun. Today, the UK Export Finance has signed a landmark financing deal with Nigeria. Forgive me, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we know who each others are. Forgive me. They are refurbishing 2 of our major ports. As part of that agreement, British Steel Limited will supply 120,000 tonnes of steel billets for this work. That is £70 million of contract, the largest ever British steel order that UKEF has ever backed, strengthening and sustaining Britain's future as a steel-making nation. Madam Deputy Speaker, we need steel made in Britain in all of its forms. We need it for the 1.5 million new homes that we are committed to build, for the 3rd runway that we have approved at Heathrow that will require 400,000 tonnes of steel. We need it for our new data centres and gigafactories, such as Agratas, the gigafactory in Somerset. 23,000 tonnes of steel have already gone into its construction, all sourced from the UK. Britain needs a steel industry for our national security, for our economic security and the national interest, to secure the security that Britain needs, both internationally competitive and a steel-making nation, not just because our past was built on steel, but because our future depends on it. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. We on these benches very much believe in a sovereign steel industry, but what we see today is a multi-billion-pound shot in the dark, and it heralds, Madam Deputy Speaker, the end of primary steel production in the UK. Yes, it does. And to set the record straight and to be clear, there'd no longer be any steel production in Wales without action from the last government. Today's steel strategy has no plan to make the industry stand on its own 2 feet. It's risking a permanent state-funded drain on taxpayers. Because British Steel was losing £700,000 a day when the government took emergency action last year, and now the taxpayer is losing an estimated £1.3 million a day. It's a subsidy of £110,000 per job to keep the Scunthorpe blast furnace operational. This steel strategy doesn't include any exit strategy, risking a permanent drain on taxpayers. And now the government is negotiating handing taxpayers' money to a Chinese business which it said was worth nothing, while hitting British users of steel with a 50% tariff hike. Now, given the previous Secretary of State said that British steel had zero value, will this current Secretary of State confirm whether compensation will be paid to Jingyi? How are these new tariffs going to harm the cost of living for our constituents? How much will the tariffs raise? These tariffs are a massive tax hike on our world-leading automotive, defence and aerospace sectors that will make building homes, bridges and railways more expensive. So has the government carried out any impact assessment on these tariffs? Won't jobs be lost in these other sectors? The government says in its strategy that electric arc furnaces are the future, but without competitive energy, green steel will simply become no steel. If electric arc furnaces are the future, when will the blast furnaces at Scunthorpe be decommissioned? How many jobs are going to be lost in that process? Where will the £2.5 billion go, Madam Deputy Speaker? Is it all going into the Scunthorpe blast furnaces? And how is this £2.5 billion spending spree fiscally responsible? What is the Secretary of State cutting to pay for it? The so-called National Wealth Fund is rapidly becoming the National Slush Fund. Our Shadow Secretary of State for Energy, Secretary and Net Zero has announced our cheap power plan, slashing energy bills for businesses and households. The Conservatives will axe the carbon tax, scrap extortionate subsidies for wind and solar, repeal the Climate Change Act and end the ban on new oil and gas licences to maximise domestic extraction and reduce dependence on foreign energy imports. Could the Secretary of State please copy this approach? Because this is a government subsidising decline, reaching for protectionist tariffs, and after the botched nationalisation of Scunthorpe and the surrender of the Chagos Islands, we can see from this steel strategy that when Labour negotiates, the British taxpayer loses.
Secretary of State.
Well, I am grateful to see her at the dispatch box, and it's always an honour to have exchanges with her, and it has been for quite some time. She mentions Wales, but she seems to have no idea about the breadth and the depth of the steel industry across Wales. She seems to think there is only one steel maker, one steel manufacturer, one steel operator in Wales. There is not. She seems to forget all about Severn Steel in Cardiff. So, of course, it explains why this government, when they were in government, that they failed to actually support and have a strategy and a vision for steel because they didn't actually know who was making steel and where they were. This government understands all of the steel assets that we have, and we are now creating a strategy to make sure that all of them are adding up to more than some of their parts, and we have a domestic industry which is actually sustainable and secure and growing into the future. Now, she seems to want to exit from British Steel without any more investment whatsoever. That would be the worst of all worlds. She wants to exit and to straddle and to strand an entire community. We will stand by that community and make sure that that is an industry and a sector that thrives into the future. And on tariffs, let me just explain to the party that used to be about free and fair trade that fair trade depends free trade depends on fair trade. Now, fair trade depends on not having overcapacity. You cannot have overcapacity and fair trade, therefore we must actually correct the market and offer protection where overcapacity is in danger of decimating one of our key industries for defence and security and future prosperity. And let me just finish, Madam Deputy Speaker, because the worst thing that could be done for the British steel industry is to do nothing. And all we have heard from the party opposite is don't do any of the things we're doing with no alternative that makes any sense whatever. It is the do-nothing party, and that is the worst of all worlds.
Yeah.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, at least there is a steel strategy from this government, unlike the previous administration. And credit where credit's due, it is right to impose tariffs and quotas. But that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is as far as it goes, because otherwise it is visionless and it is hamstrung by net stupid zero. I mean, you've got the absurd situation that the public sector is buying tens of thousands of tonnes of steel from China rather than from Scunthorpe and British Steel. This is a complete betrayal of thousands of workers in Scunthorpe. There's no vision. Will the Minister confirm when will the blast furnaces be closed at Scunthorpe, whereas reform will renew and replace them? And will the Minister guarantee that the electric arc furnace in Port Talbot, when it's built, that it will definitely open for business?
Secretary of State.
So his point seems to be, and can I also welcome, I haven't had an opportunity yet, the shadow, or as I say, the shadowy Secretary of State, the self-appointed to his position. He seems to say that despite the investment we're putting in, despite the protections we're putting in, despite the modernisations, which he recognises are all good, despite that, it's not quite visionary enough. However, in his contribution, wasn't able to actually point to a vision for a more comprehensive future for the steel industry. He also seems to think that electric arc furnaces are woke. But let me just say that there is nothing woke about an electric arc furnace, which, when rolled out for the transition, will create us as a market leader globally, which is what the industries themselves are calling for. The British domestic suppliers and for those who are demanding that steel is requiring into the future. And I can assure him we are on the side of the industry and its vision. We are matching its ambition, its potential for the future. He wants to cast us back into the past.
Nick Smith.